All right, this is going to be fun, Miranda. I'm going to see if I can pronounce it Coppoolse. Is that correct?
Almost.
Almost. Say it correctly.
Coppoolse.
Coppoolsa.
Right.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, it is fantastic to have you on the Leaders Who Care series, and we're going to show everybody why in a few minutes. So welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks. Thanks. And best way to start, as I usually say, is if you could introduce yourself briefly, not about what you do or business or stuff like that, but who are you? Where are you from originally? Where you are now? Family? Do you want to talk about maybe something you've never told anybody in the world and you want to tell the world now? That's fine too. Just tell us about Miranda.
I like to be entitled to my little secrets now, but who am I? Well, I'm a woman from Europe, from the Netherlands. Actually, I'm born there, born raised there. I lived all over the world, Middle East, U.S., Canada, and Europe, of course. Uh, Not married, no kids. Uh, Due to my work, it was just not happening. And what more? My hobbies. Well, I like gardening. I like being in the outdoors, hiking, that kind of stuff. So I'm really a nature girl. I'm an animal lover, and yeah, I think I'm very boring if I think of that. I'm not doing really a
No,
lot
you're
of time
hardly
because I'm
boring.
working
And
all the time.
you say animal lover, so am I. And there's a great show on TV I saw again recently. It's called Bizarre Friends or Strangers or whatnot, and it's about the weirdest combinations of animals being friends with each other. So you'd get like an elephant and a dog, for example,
Right, right.
and so many things we can learn from them about like being present and caring and survival even and stuff like that. It's fantastic. Do you have a favorite animal?
Uh, Geez, probably a lion. I
Hmm.
think they're fascinating, but also I really love all animals. Like my friends already know when I see an animal, I'm already distracted, kind of. So I don't know. They have something cute, and otherwise probably Formula One. That's one of the sports that I really follow, and I'm a great fan of.
Oh, fantastic. You know, when I walk the beach is not far from here, I know more dog names than people names out there.
Okay, that's a
Um,
good sign.
Yeah, exactly. And they're usually the more, even though they don't talk English or whatever language, they talk a great language.
I
So
think so too. Love and loyalty is really for me that is tied to animals, especially dogs, of course. But yeah.
yeah, no, I'm with you 100% of the way. So we'll have to figure out how to put them in charge. Actually, not to get too far off, but once somebody did a comedy skit the other day or saw it again, where it said if aliens were coming down and they saw that the dogs are out there and the dogs are pooping and the humans are actually picking up the poop.
Picking it up.
They actually think the dogs are in charge. So, which makes sense, I guess. So it's hilarious. But so what were you like as a kid or a teenager? Did you like action movies, considering what you do? Were you like
Mhm.
into computers, sports, music? What were you like?
I think a bit of, well, action movies, yes, but back in the days we didn't have that much television yet. So I reveal my age
You
probably by now.
know?
At least we didn't have that much television when I was young, and I think Netflix and all those other channels were first in the US and afterwards in Europe. I'm not sure about that, but I was never much of a television girl. But if I watched anything, it was uh, action, probably, or well, anything with animals, of course, but nature movies, that kind of stuff. I'm an outdoorsy girl. I was always playing outside. I was kind of a tomboy kind of girl. So yeah, I never really I got some Barbies, but I remember when I had them, I turned them into my own little army. So I cut their hairs and one part I painted green, I remember, and the other one silver. So they were my knights.
Well, that's pretty cool. That's fascinating. I was talking to another woman who said she'd come home from school and put her stuffed animals in a row and talk to what she did in school that they to her stuffed
Oh, cute.
animals.
Yeah.
So you just made yours like green and silver and your knights. I like that.
Yeah, I think I've always been about helping the good people and fighting the bad people. I don't know why, it's always been in me.
Well, that's a good thing to have in you. And we're it's definitely a good thing to just, especially in this day and age to have
Well, I turned it into my profession, of course, eventually even. So, yeah.
and I find that a lot, which is why I asked the question. I'm interested in it, but there's always a thread, it seems, as a kid, young kid, either some kind of influence or whatever, or something in us that leads us in a certain direction. And let's start talking about your journey a little bit where, you've had training in amazing different areas, like a ton of training and all sorts of things from, and I won't go through them all, but loss and mourning to domestic violence. You've had
Mhm.
airport and port security, multiple behavioral and psychology courses and programs, and then there's terrorism studies, plus, 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 plus. So what intrigued you, based on our conversation now, to take that path and to continue to keep learning more?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, I was in my teens. I had some bad experiences in well, a bad relationship, and I ended up with the wrong people, and eventually got kidnapped and escaped. And at that time, when I came back, I was put in a home for women with domestic violence and all that stuff. And I looked around, and many of them went back for whatever reason. I don't judge them at all, but I was like, I don't want to be a victim. I just want to do something with my experiences. And then I started, well, doing courses and focusing on security, what's really going on there. Everywhere around me, I saw that things were not really safe enough. And I felt like maybe I could make a difference, especially with my experiences. So I started studying it, and I found out soon that I was one of the few females in the industry.
Yeah, I
So I
bet.
had to prove myself like not double, but triple. And so I thought, like, if I study multiple things, at least I know, like, have a broad knowledge and know a little bit of everything. And eventually, all that knowledge together combined made who I am today with all the experiences. And I really found it's sad that it's needed, first of all, but I found it really fascinating, and especially because it all came back to the person itself, their behavior, the way that they were raised, the way that they were thinking and acting, and the why behind it. And that really intrigued me, and also behavior analysis. And that's what I did as a child also. I always observed everyone, and tried to imagine almost, or to, yeah, think of what their next move would be, or their next sentence. It was a little game that I played with myself, and eventually I turned that into my profession.
Yeah, I find that fascinating, going back to what we just started with as a kid, how whether someone's in sports or their parents are doing something, or you pick up these characteristics, like with the dolls and the Barbie and the colors and a need to care for people, and stuff like that. And you know, we're always talking about in our business about combining, economic impact and social impact, and doing good is actually good for business and good for community. And in your world of security, I mean, you got risk assessments and compliance. Like I said, you've
Mhm.
got airports to children's hospitals you worked with, and children's rescue, and even now your own security company, as well as, police in Netherlands. Talk a little bit more about, you talk about your passion, what created, and how you view that as social impact, really, as really caring for community, um, and how it's got to be, and how the economics get into it to be sustainable, that you can keep doing what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah. I think evil will never go away. So in that sense, we always unfortunately have work. I would gladly give it up if there would be world peace, but that will never happen. But I
Almost
also
never.
think that if you want to start a movement, you have to start by, with yourself and try to be the best example. And of course, I'm not perfect. I've been in situations where I got mad and later thought like, oh my God, why did I just flip like that? But it's just and that's also one of the things that I studied later. Like, why do people do that? That initially you are a good person, but then somebody does something and you get so mad. So
It's,
uh, in that
it's
sense, I think it's sustainable because it will always be a business.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. It's sustainable. It's kind of like I knew a guy in college I went to with, and his family grandfather started a funeral home, and he tried to get money from the bank, and he took the bank officer outside, and he says, "There's my collateral. All those people,
Yeah,
they're going to pass away," and they gave him a loan because of
yeah.
it. And so, in a weird way, it's sustainable that way. You kind of state that the common thread in your working methods is always the person's behavior and motivation. I found
Mhm.
that quote somewhere. You've talked a little bit about how you've applied your behavioral training and education. Can you give us one or two examples of experiences you've had that really stand out for you?
Wow, I've said so many. Um, I think training bodyguards, for instance, at first that was never a thing, and now all of a sudden that's their whole new uh, to go to almost, how to read people. So I wrote a training for that, and that really helped a lot of people. I coach a lot of people, many actually, and also the impact for me and the behavior was especially when I came into the human trafficking industry. I found that especially with children or young people, when they were rescued, first of all, the whole rescue operation was usually done by men wherever in the world. And I've done many rescues, of course, myself with those men. And I saw that those children, because they often were captured by males,
Right.
uh, really were like, what is happening here? Is another guy going to kidnap me and bring me? So, what is the best approach, or the best approach right after you took that child? So, I wrote a whole program for that and, of course, tested it, and a whole, not interrogation, but interviewing program for them. And that really
That's a
changed a
great
lot.
point, though. We talked about peace before and whatnot, and I've done work in been on the board of an organization that was for preventing and they also worked with Navy SEALs who went out to get kids back and stuff. But it's such a great point. They say that it's going to be women and moms that are going to be the ones that demand peace. But to your point, and I've talked to some survivors. Um, I talked to one that was a woman that was amazing. She did a speech where I was doing a speech also for this, and she amazed me that what she was put through and then escaped, and it was a crazy escape, and then she was still able to have a husband and a partner and kids, and she talked about how hard that was. But more to your point about you got another man approaching you, that's got to be horrifying versus now a woman approaching you. In the same way of having peace, it's a different
Yeah.
everything, right?
Oftentimes, not always. So you also have to study your victims. Who are you going to rescue and whom are you going to have the interview done with? So that's really important for me, at least. But yeah, if you don't have time to study and you have to pick them right away just to get them out, and then right after, at least you have to take the right precautions.
Sure.
And that's what I'm trying to have tried to put in place, at least.
Well, and with
And
respect
there's
to
always room for improvement, though. But
Oh yeah, and people, every person's different, so it's different behaviors, like you said. And describe the planning, the analysis that's involved, where the location, the culture, even media plays a role on your engagements, like pre-engagement, during the engagement, post-engagement, where social media stuff gets out, it plays a role, but mostly like when you're in an engagement, whether it's police or trafficking or whatnot, what's the planning and prep you have to do for that to make it as successful as possible?
That really depends on the case, to be honest. For just interviewing a criminal is very different from rescuing an abused
Sure.
child. So with prepping, I'd like to know as much as possible about a person already. I usually do behavioral analysis checks depending on or yeah, on the person that I'm going to interview or have to arrest, or so that really differs. And that's why I always say that it's never a one time trick. You study something and you do it. It's really experience. Um, for instance, with children, we have to know, or women that are trafficked, you have to know in what country they are, what is their culture, what are their customs, but also how can you observe them and look for them? Who do you use for that? How do you find trustworthy people in that country? How do you
Right.
get police cooperating with you? Because if you just take them out, you are kidnapping them yourself, right? So you have to be aware of all the rules and regulations also of a certain country. And if you approach them in their cultural behaviors almost, then they are way more calm with you than if you just come from a completely different country and treat them differently. And of course, in the Middle East, for instance, is already way different from Western countries
Right.
in cultural behaviors, even shaking hands, men and women overall don't do that, for instance. Or in India, if you shake your head, it's yes, and if you do that, it's no, for
Right.
instance. So yeah, you have to be aware of where you're going, what people you are dealing with, and for interrogations, because I also do a lot of interrogations, I like to prepare, and I like to even know where that person comes from, what have they done, how old are they, do I know anything about their friends or relatives?
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that's brilliant. I've had some people tell me, like, SEALs that have gone in and they've asked, police for support. There was one where there was way more kids than they thought were there, and they
oh
asked the
yeah,
local
you
police and what for support, and they wouldn't do it because they were afraid to do it. They were afraid to support for whatever reason, and had to do their own thing. And I also had an interesting example with an organization called Tostan that went into Senegal and Africa to help against women's mutilation, where used to do that a
Mhm.
lot. And they
Right.
found out very quickly that even the women, because of, like you say, the culture and tradition, even the women that were having that happen to them, um, didn't weren't allowing them to be helped because it was tradition. You have to do that, even if they were getting hurt or dying or the kids dying. And so they had to take a different route and talk about hygiene until the women asked about, well, what about this? And they
Mhm.
actually went to speak to the amans about and the elderlies about this, and they kept looking in all the religious books, and it was never written anywhere that you do this. And they're saying, well, then who decided this in the first place?
Yeah.
But so it's so deep, the culture, that you're right. You gotta maneuver, I guess.
Yeah, and you also always have to find people who speak their language.
True. Otherwise, yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah,
um,
but it's also to comfort them even. So
yeah, and people appreciate and trust you when they feel that you really care. And that's one way of showing it.
definitely.
I mean, you
Yeah.
talked a little bit about obviously being a woman, and our firm is we were launched on International Women's Day. We're very involved in women empowerment and women leadership and stuff like that, and even girls. But describe a little more your journey as a woman, where you said a lot of times you were the only one, and encounters you had, or how it affected you, and how you thrived to get to where you are right now.
Right. Well, I not always have thrived, of course.
Well, I know that,
Yeah,
but
that's not usually the way life is. So no, I've had my battles, but yeah, and that's probably really not popular for me saying this, but I am not so much about empowering women to be in a certain profession. I'm just like for the right person at the right place. So, and if that is a woman that can do what a man can do, amazing.
sure.
But you have to also deal with the culture that you're in, right? So I think I'm great at adapting
Hmm.
overall. Of course, have worked with some guys that I was not really happy with. They probably also not with me. Um, you have to be strong-minded, because if you're soft, they will play with you, and also you have to understand their humor. And probably I have have some dark humor that that I can use when I'm with them. They don't talk about flowers and how great that smell of that perfume is.
They would
Uh,
like to sometimes, actually, but they wouldn't do it publicly.
right, yeah, but not in a group
Yeah.
with men, and especially not on the job. When you have like an assignment, you just want to do it, and you want to do it right, and you want to know that the people that are with you are capable, also physical. So I trained a lot. I did a lot of martial arts. So I tried to keep up with them as much as I could, because I really
Yeah.
wanted to do that work, and I wanted to show them that women could also do it. Um, but I made sure that I was qualified for it. And I didn't do it because I just wanted to show that it was also a work that, or a job that females could do.
Yeah, and I think
Uh,
it's a brilliant answer. And
yeah,
women I work with never want to get hired because they're a woman. They want to get hired because they're great at what they do. And the
exactly.
fact that they're a woman, they can be proud of that. But
Yeah.
no one who is really good ever wants to get hired because you're this or that. They want to get hired because you're great at what that is. And but I know it's been a journey for women to get to that point too. Just
Right.
because of
No,
how
and
men were
I
trained.
really support them. I really feel that they should go and do that if they really want a certain job. But don't whine and complain if
That
if
doesn't
you
work.
cannot deal with the guy's humor, or if you're not strong enough and they bully you a little. That's what guys do. So you bully them back and you become equals, and you have a laugh about it, and then you go for it. They need to know that you have their six, and that's the other way around too, right? And
Yeah.
especially on missions that I've usually gone on, I just want to make sure that I'm safe, but I want to make sure that I can help them too if shit hits the fan. um,
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And that's what a qualified person does. They show their stuff
mhm.
basically
Yeah,
and goes along. And then, it's like a sport, like a team in sports. The players want to know that the other players have their back and they're aligned. And at the end of the day, you're all there to do this to get the same goal, period. So,
exactly.
you
Yeah.
know. Talk to me about a little bit about how tech, with evolution of tech and even now with AI moving faster than ever, how has that impacted in any way what you do, or even your thoughts about where your what you do is going, and how you use tech to be better for the community, be better, etc. How have you evolved with it as well?
Oh, I'm trying to evolve. I'm not really that great with tech, but I have a great team around me that is.
What works?
And I work with, of course, great people. But the bad thing is now you have a lot of hacks, that happen with companies or governments. How do you protect yourself? Usually, the hackers, there are some lone wolves, of course, but usually they're part of a big organized crime like organization, and oftentimes they have way more money that a
I
small
know.
company or than even a police
Hmm.
station or a political office or whatever, the
Sure.
government even, so it's easier for them to hire people, and a lot of people can be bought with money nowadays. So
Unfortunately.
on one hand, I think it's amazing because now we have the world at our feet. You can use the internet and you can get answers to almost everything. The downside of it is it's also a dark side, you
Yeah.
know. People take advantage, people feed you with information that is often not true. A lot of people believe that, a lot of people get brainwashed believing into a certain stream that goes on the internet. So, and I see now little kids behind screens all day long. And if there's something with my phone and I go to like a 3-year-old, they can help me probably with fixing my phone, right? I was eating mud when I was 3, but they can fix it for you. So it has good and bad sides. I think
Yeah, of course.
it's good for many things if we use it right. It's sad that there are always evil people that want to take advantage of it, and they just do.
Well, like you said before, there'll always be. So it's up to the rest of us to know how to use it. I saw a great interview with the granddaughter of Martin Luther King Jr., and she's not a kid anymore. She's married and whatnot, but she said something brilliantly simple. She said, we have to, when we're on technology, we have to really pay more attention to the character and the principles of the persons that where that message is coming from. So to be able to have the ability to say, well, maybe this doesn't seem right, what this person's saying, because of how you know who they are, or you think you know who they are, and you do more research and find out rather than just accepting what's come across. And easier said than done sometimes because it moves so fast.
Yeah.
But but it is brilliantly simple that you have to look at where the source is and who it is, and make decisions that
Yeah,
way.
yeah, but not even in work. I mean, in general, you see
Absolutely.
how people view each other. There's a lot of insecurity. There's some models, they are oftentimes made by AI, and people believe that's the perfect body of the perfect face, and they completely change each other or themselves with
Well,
plastic
that can.
surgery. And so I don't think necessarily everything is good, and I hope that we can find a way to also reach those people.
Well, I think we are. I was just on a panel really quick called AI and Love Intelligence, and they're trying to teach, like you teach a baby how to be, and the baby grows up and is not perfect, trying to do that with AI and infusing into the algorithms um, words of love, positivity, caring, and whatnot, and try to make it that way. Last question on this part. Time usually goes so fast. In LA, we usually say, we always want to leave the people wanting more because then we could do a sequel, which is typical LA,
Mm.
kind of thing.
Right.
But 2020 was the pandemic year, and a client of mine told me once. He said, it was the year that flew by slowly. And I always found that because sometimes it feels like COVID was yesterday and yet years ago, which it was at the same time. With all that's happened, we're already almost at the end of the year 2024. What are you most grateful for? And also, what are you most hopeful for?
For the future or for what happened
Well, what are you
during
most
the
grateful for right now based on what has been happening the last several years and even the pandemic? And then for the future, yeah, what are you most hopeful for?
Well, I still hope and pray that the world will become a better place.
Yeah,
I don't want to give up on that hope. It's just, why can people not be nicer to each other and help each other, to get better, a bit better versions of themselves.
I agree.
That's what I'm still hoping for. Yeah, and the last couple of years, I think that has always been in me. When I'm with people, I'm always genuine, and even the criminals, I always try to leave them with something that I hope they will think about and become a better person. Not that it always works out well. But I try, and I will never give up trying. And yeah, during the pandemic, I remember that I was still working due to the things that I did. There
Sure.
was a lot going on. I remember I was training humanitarians all over the world for more like stress inoculation trainings for, what if you're being kidnapped, or if you have to negotiate your price out, that kind of
Mm.
stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I also remember that I was on empty planes, empty airports, because there were only a few
That's
planes
right.
going out, and
So you got the
so
best
that
seats.
was a strange, strange world.
That must have been strange, but did you get first class because of that or what? Um,
No, no,
yeah, that I was on a
really
couple
not.
of flights, probably not like you. I was on a couple of flights during COVID and it was pretty empty. I can't imagine just empty planes. Um, type of thing. It's kind of an eerie feeling, I bet, in that
Yeah.
sense.
Well, I've worked on airports for many years in the beginning, where I did profiling, and I was a profile trainer. So I'm quite used to airports, and also at night when they are more quiet. So in that sense, but it was just overall a crazy world that you have to ask to go outdoors, from your local government, or to go to stores and stand in line, and all the jabs. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, no,
I, I
it's but
sincerely
I
hope that never comes back.
no kidding. Well, I'm grateful that you are, even in the business you're in, a leader who does care about people, because I think that is important. And I'm also grateful I have a new friend also, which is cool. And for the same reason, I'm hopeful actually, because we have to keep the hope, right, and keep the faith that it's that there's more good out there than bad, which I still believe. So
Yeah, they always
but
say hope does living, right?
yeah,
If there's no
absolutely.
hope, what are we doing anyway? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So thank you for being on the series and sharing. It's great having you.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.